Hey friends, my name is Terry. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes and spending it with me and my new friend Jerome. I found him on YouTube by just watching some content, and as you probably are aware, I am on a weight loss journey and also kind of applying a carnivore and some fasting lifestyle, and I found his videos helpful. I'm going to put up some links so that you can find him as well. And I just reached out to him just as a kind of a taking a flyer, if you will, and he actually responded. And so here he is right here on the screen with me. You can see him, and I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself. But I'm kind of curious to pick his brain and hopefully bring you some value on some of the things that he, with his story, has done and what he does with this personal training business. So Jerome, thank you so much for taking some time. I'm going to give you the floor and kind of let you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do and all of the rest.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm a big believer that time is our most valuable asset. Once it's gone, we can never get it back. We can always make more money. We can always get certain material things back, but time once gone can never be reobtained. So the fact that you would take time out of your schedule to reach out to me, this means something very deeply personal and profound to me. So to start off, thank you for that. My name is Jerome. I own a personal training studio in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin called 18 Minute Fitness. My clients and myself generally only exercise once a week for no more than about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm a big proponent of a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet by extension. Also a big fan of fasting. And Terry and I have had some fantastic engagement behind the scenes via email, so thank you again.
Absolutely. So let's jump into, let's just kind of man, I don't know if I want to go through activity or if I want to go to diet first, but let's go with, because you work out in a gym. I work out in my backyard with some rings and a pull-up bar, and do you have any thoughts on, because I'm a 54-year-old guy. Let's say you're in your 50s and you're trying to get this done. Just talk to me a little bit about what you would, 18, a little bit about how, because your approach seems different with that whole one time a week with your clients. How would you tell someone like myself to kind of, if they were sitting there on their ass too much, how would they get off the couch and get started? What would you kind of give them a little encouragement or push off to do?
Sure. I think the first thing that I would encourage is saying that just do generally active things that you enjoy. I'm a huge proponent of taking walks. And when you're looking at exercise to try and improve the overall quality of your life, that's a little bit more of a nuanced thing. I would also say that the fitness industry is replete with a number of contradictory theories, each espousing to be the best way to build muscle, to lose fat, to look better naked, whatever the goal is. But there can only be one most accurate description of any aspect of reality. So me and people within the high-intensity training camp, the super slow training camp, the Body by Science camp, we all fairly strictly adhere to high-intensity training principles. Basically, exercise to be most productive has to be intense. If it's sufficiently intense, it must be brief. And because exercise is a physical stress on the body, it takes a significant amount of time to recover from. The allegory that I generally use is if you were to try and step outside and get a suntan, there's lots of different ways you could go about it. You could step outside. It's January here in Wisconsin. There's not a lot of direct UV light. I could step outside for 5 minutes at a time, go back in, go back outside for 5 minutes, come back in. And if I got enough exposure to UV light, I would give myself a little bit of a suntan. But the best way to do it is either step in a tanning bed or go out in like August sunlight for the precise amount of time that my genetics will allow, and then come back in and let the adaptation happen. So exercise doesn't have to be overly complicated. You don't need to do any crazy moves. You don't need really any fancy equipment. All it really takes is hard work and then however much time your body needs to recover, and that's going to be largely mediated by genetics and diet.
I love it. So my coach is Sabine, and she does what she calls calisthenics. And I found her through a guy named JT who does kind of body weight strength kind of stuff. And it's interesting you said that it took me a while to and I've been doing it about a year. And I definitely, while I'm still obese at 250 pounds, I am definitely stronger. I look at my shoulders and I'm like, wow, I got bumps on the back of my shoulders now. And I can just tell by what I do. And I think, man, if I was 200 pounds, like when I'm trying to do scapula pulls, for example, I think I could probably get so much further if I had 50 pounds off. Like there's only so much muscle I can build at a 250 frame to get the movement done. But what I will say, one of the things that Sabine really beat into my head was like 1 or 2 sets. And she's like, you're really making the progress on those last 2 or 3, maybe the last 1 or 2, reps that you do. And because I send her one of the little training things, she's in California, I'm here, and she actually trains me for free, which is so nice. Kind of her. But my point is, and I'm kind of going on a little bit long on this, is that we set up a iCloud shared album, and I'll do videos of my sets, kind of shorten them up a little bit, and I just put them in the folder. She'll look at it and make comments. And one of the things she noticed was that on the negative portion of whatever I was doing, let's say I was doing a negative, like coming down off the bar. I was right when I got to that where I would hold and I would just release instead of doing a controlled release all the way to the floor. And she's like, that last little 5 seconds, she's like, that's where you're missing out on that gain right there potentially, yep. Right? You know, and I think people need to, that's what I heard in some of what you were just saying is what I'm trying to get to, is that you don't have to do 100 push-ups. I mean, even if you can only do maybe 1 or 2, if you can get that much off the ground, but if you're on that third one and you can't quite get there, like get in that hold, right, and create that, like go to failure essentially is I guess what they say. Is that correct?
Yeah, you want to train with as much intensity as you safely can. And without getting too into the weeds, muscle fibers are recruited sequentially, starting with the smallest, weakest ones. And then as those fibers fatigue, you start tapping into the bigger, stronger type 2X oxidative fibers. So the only way to fully stimulate the amount of muscle that you're capable of recruiting is to work to a point of momentary muscular failure. And there's some nuance there, and you can do it over a wide variety of time intervals. Possibly, if you can do it safely, as low as maybe 7 to 10 seconds. I generally recommend every exercise take between about 60 to 90 seconds. But as long as you're pushing your body hard, and you can do so in a way to where you don't compromise form, the actual number of repetitions that you do really doesn't matter. I have a couple clients here in my studio that, due to pre-existing health conditions, so I have someone with torn meniscus in his knee, and I have people with rheumatoid arthritis or lupus, and with them sometimes we don't even do movements. We'll do just isometric exercise, but I'll have them forcibly contract the muscles even though nothing is actually moving. As long as you work that muscle hard within a reasonable time frame, and don't have these massive loading or deloading of large amounts of force on the muscles, you can very safely elicit the beneficial aspects of exercise without a large volume of exercise. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there.
No, that's, I totally get it, because it's like when she would coach me to when I was doing like this was a year and a half ago, I really couldn't even do a pull. So she was just like, how long can you hang on a bar? And it was like, I could maybe get 8 seconds. And then she was like, well, while you're hanging there, are you engaging your core and pointing your toes, kind of thing? And it's like, you might as well engage the whole thing while you're doing that, and then I eventually went on from there. But it's the second point I wanted to go back to that I think just to not gloss over, which is a great place to start, is to have fun. Like the adage in my world from what you said was, something's always better than nothing. So if you're sitting on your couch, go check your mail if it's outside, walk, and then while you're out there, might as well walk around the block. And I purposely walk through my parks. I have a couple of parks in my neighborhood, which are nice. And I just see bars, for the kids or whatever. I'm like, what? I go across the, do I really think that's adding strength per se? But it's adding some enjoyment from me. Or I'll hang and I'll do kind of a lazy man row with my feet on the ground kind of thing, Yep. Just kind of kicking around, doing some extra little things that might not be, something you would have me do for strength training, but to me, it's like, I don't know. I think it goes back to the Atomic Habits, James Clear idea of that, like doing the monkey bars or something like I'm putting a check mark in that, hey, I'm a healthy guy, not a guy that sits on his ass on the couch all the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Maybe then a benefit of like, oh, I'm actually building strength. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, and I do have a number of clients that sometimes I'll have them only do static holds because depending on the equipment that you have available, sometimes people, when they can no longer move a weight during exercise, they think that this is the point where they've reached momentary muscular failure. And in actuality, your muscles have what are called strength curves, which is just a varying amount of force that they're capable of producing based on where they are in their range of movement. And the resistance provided by some machines or some barbells doesn't always match that same curve. So I apologize for the bit of the long-winded explanation, but what happens then is sometimes the bar will get stuck in a position where you still have a lot more effort that you're capable of exerting, but it's not moving because the resistance is too much relative to the amount of torque that the muscles can produce in that position of the range of movement. So
gotcha.
If all someone can do is take a walk, go down to their mailbox, or if they have something that they can hang from, that absolutely can and does make a difference. Because if you can only hang for 10 seconds, if you have to stand up on a chair and then go to a bar or pull-up bar and just hang there for 10 seconds, maybe 2 days later that might be 11 or 12 seconds. And over enough time, that'll get to the point where eventually you can do a really slow controlled negative, and before you know it, you'll be doing pull-ups for most individuals. So yeah, absolutely. There's something to be said with respect to enjoying to an extent what you're doing. Arthur Jones had a quote in the 70s. He said, if you like exercise, you're probably doing it wrong. So I don't want to lean too hard into that. But again, exercise is often way overcomplicated. If you're pushing your limits, that's the only way to expand them. And if you're doing that, then that's awesome. And even if you don't exercise the way that I recommend, for somebody who's taking that time to really try and improve their lives and their physique and their health, that should be applauded. And I have a lot of respect for that.
I love it. I think that it goes to that I've heard it said that there's the two types of enjoyment: the enjoyment in the moment of like, hey, I'm at a concert, or I'm having a great time with my wife at dinner, or something like that. And then there's that enjoyment factor of like, oh, I just finished my first triathlon, and it's like in the moment you really weren't having that much fun, but after the fact you look back and you're like, wow, that was a great time. I had a great time doing all that, and it's like working out. It falls into that second category of like, in the moment, you're probably not having the best time ever, but when you grind it out, you're like, man, yeah, I had a good time. That was fun. I had a good work,out. Something like that.
That's a much better way to put it. Thank you.
Well, I'm listening. I'm reflecting back. As you're a professional in this space. I'm an amateur trying to just bring a voice to the space a little bit. So let's shift gears and talk on a little bit of the carnivore diet, and because I'm curious. I think you and I, one of the things that actually caught my attention when I was watching some of your videos, you mentioned sardines, I think, in one of the videos, it was one of your live videos, and I put in there about having sardines for breakfast. Although I had eggs today for breakfast, but generally I like sardines for breakfast, believe it or not, around 9 o'clock post workout. Let's talk a little bit about that. And for context, can you add a little bit about your weight loss journey? Because when looking at you now, for example, like you look trim, and I don't know what you weigh. You probably have abs, and you're probably all buff and everything. And but I'm still in the obese category. I'm 39% body fat. I did a DEXA scan so I have this was about a year ago. I hope I have a little bit more muscle, but I had about 150. I'm 5'9". I had about probably pretty classic 5'9", about 155 lean muscle or lean tissue or lean mass or whatever that accounts, and I had a bunch of fat. Right, the rest of it's fat. So anyway, how do you formulate your keto or your carnivore diet, if you will?
Sure. I'll try and keep it short. Can I take 60 seconds and kind of give a little bit of my history with...
Take as much time as you want. Yeah. Because I threw that in there, and then I let's start there. Let's start about your kind of where you went to and how you landed. Because it sounds like, because we also have a shared history of some fasting, the snake diet guy who's a wackadoo cool. I've never met the guy, but I would love to meet him just to hear how crazy he is. let's talk a little bit about your journey, and then let's talk about how it landed into the carnivore space that you're in now.
Sure, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'll try and be brief.
Yeah.
I was a heavy kid growing up, and I was made fun of for having a big forehead. I was in speech therapy, so people couldn't understand what I said. I was overweight. So I've always been fairly individualistic. I've kind of kept everything to myself, and I used food like a coping mechanism. It made me feel different. I've never been big into drugs, but food kind of was my drug. It was one way that I handled stress. So I was heavy growing up. Shortly after high school, I got big into running because I thought doing large amounts of cardio would be a good way to see changes in my body. I got down to about 155 pounds. I'm 5'11". And realized that, like,
that's lean.
Yeah, and realized then that, like, I didn't have abs, I didn't have any muscle tone, so I decided to start lifting weights. And it was something that I had done fairly casually before then, and I responded fairly well to resistance training. Fast forward a few years, I was working in corporate America. I was a volunteer firefighter, and my then wife got pregnant, and we were toying around with the idea of having a kid, but my daughter was still kind of an oops baby. So I got really stressed out, and I ate like it was going out of style. And over the course of my wife's pregnancy, I think I gained about 90 pounds. My heaviest I ever was 297. And fast forward a couple years later, 2015 or so, my wife threw me a surprise birthday party. And I remember people at that party looked shocked and somewhat horrified when they saw me, because last they had saw me, I was kind of muscular, maybe like 180 pounds, in pretty decent shape. And I remember seeing this look, and I just kind of wanted to crawl into a hole and die because of how embarrassed I was to have people that hadn't seen me in years kind of show up, and I was almost 300 pounds. Being a volunteer firefighter at the time, I knew that the number one cause of firefighters is a heart attack. And if I didn't do something to get my weight in check and try and reclaim my health, that I was probably headed for a heart attack, in my mid-40s. And I didn't want my daughter to grow up without knowing her father. So for me, the impetus of change was a massive amount of pain. I knew that something had to change, but with my schedule, work, I was going to college at the time too, volunteer firefighter. I didn't have time to go to the gym the way that I used to, 5 times a week, 45, 60 minutes a day. And I turned to bodybuilder Mike Menser kind of as a last result, the approach to diet and exercise that he promulgated, which was basically one workout about 20 to 30 minutes once every 4 to 7 days, and basically just calorie counting. I followed that approach, lost about 89 pounds, I think, in a year, and a little over 100 pounds in maybe a year and 3 months. And I lost a lot of weight, but I was noticing that ever since I gained all that weight, I really struggled with headaches, and I really struggled with migraines. And Mike advocated 60% of your calories, coming from carbohydrate, 25 from protein, and 15 from fat. And at one point I heard that ketogenic diets could help with headaches. And I was getting daily headaches and probably 1 to 2 debilitating migraines a week. So I tried a ketogenic diet. It eliminated pretty much my headaches and most of my migraines. And I came across Carnivore after watching Sean Baker and Michaela Peterson on Joe Rogan's podcast, and basically just decided to try it capriciously. 3 days into trying a carnivore diet, my bedroom at the time was on the second floor. I remember I was walking downstairs, and I thought, like, man, I slept really well. And I was walking downstairs, and I remember thinking, like, my hips, my knees, my ankles don't hurt anymore. And when I went to put my shoes on that morning, I didn't have to bend over in a crooked fashion to put my shoes on. And it's interesting, like, for people that have been in pain for a long time, it's there, but you kind of get used to it. So when it's gone, it was really, really surprising. And even nowadays, if I have half a bell pepper with dinner, if I have 2 drinks a night or more, I'll wake up the next morning and my joints will hurt. That comes back right away. So I think 240 pounds right now. I look pretty decent. I don't have abs, but I don't pay too much attention to weight. As long as I look fairly decent in the mirror and I'm getting my workouts in, and I'm focusing on generally eating pretty close to a strict carnivore diet, I tend to think that if you're doing those things, that'll get you 80 to 90% of the way there. And once you want to start fine-tuning beyond that point, then you should maybe either start experimenting with a few things on your own, or ask a qualified professional who may have some insight with different things that you might want to try.
I love it. I love it. So let's hit on a couple of things on that. I made some notes while you were talking. That's a great. I can't imagine if depending on who's listening. I want to say to someone who is 300 pounds, which I've been 330 at my biggest at 5'9". Yeah. The most important thing is to take a step. Take a step. You're not going to solve. You didn't gain 300 pounds in a week, and you're not going to lose it in a week. But you've got to start. You got to start taking action, even in small ways, to get your mind to be like, I'm moving. You've got to stop moving in that direction and start moving in the healthy direction. And it's going to take some time to figure it out. And then once you're moving in that direction, I get jealous of the people I see, and they get it all done in 6 months or a year like you. And I get you have those setbacks, and a lot of it is. I'm convinced in my own journey, I'm on a small tangent here, is that it's like I'm afraid of letting go. Like I've been fat so long that I identify with it so much in the back of my mind. Like I'm not sure who I'm going to be if I lose all this fat, and you got all those mind issues that you got to deal with. But anyway, did you want to say something to that before I move on to other?
Yeah, thank you. Our body is so fundamental to our identity that I remember when I got under 200 pounds and realizing that I had cracked the 100-pound barrier. I have some pictures on Instagram that look pretty decent, but I remember standing in front of the mirror one day and like almost didn't recognize myself. And I remember how much that really scared me in the moment. There's a reason I generally keep a bit of a beard. Like when I shave my face, when my face looks a little bit thinner, it's still to an extent, sometimes I say, who is this guy? And I think it's really important to have people that you can talk to in your journey. But to piggyback on one thing you said, there would be days where I would set the smallest goal. And I said, if this is the only thing I'm going to accomplish today, then just do this one thing. And I've never been an alcoholic, but there are definitely alcoholics in my family, and I have a friend that is an alcoholic, and sometimes it's just getting through the next 5 minutes or just getting through the next 60 seconds where you might want to do something you know isn't good for you, but just if you can sit there in that moment and kind of collect your thoughts and be present in that moment and say, I understand that I want this really bad right now, but just make it through the next 60 seconds. And then once I get to that, then I'll reassess for the next 60 seconds. But I can do 60 seconds. And little things like that over time ended up being absolutely integral to my success. Absolutely.
That's a very good point. And I think that addiction is such a loaded word in today's society because they view it as very binary, or at least our society does. Either you are an alcoholic or you're not. And I think that's such a disservice because I think that food, like you talked about, using food as a coping mechanism, sugar, starch, alcohol, even digital addiction. I mean, it's honest. If you're using the substance, you're probably somewhere on the scale of quasi addicted to it. There's a habitual nature to it, and that's where people don't want to accept that, basically. And going back to getting through the 60 seconds on my sobriety journey. I came up with this theory, probably someone told me and I repeated it to myself, but I would call it staring at the wall. Anytime where I was struggling with that urge, because basically in most addictions, you can get over the physical nature in 30, 60 days, if it's not too crazy. And so you really got to just look through the pain for 60 days, let's say. And I would say, you know what? I'm going to go sit in a chair. I'm going to stare at the wall until this goes away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's the only thing. And I would call it sitting with the pain. And so I wanted to do something, and I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm going to sit in this chair. And then I eventually picked up a Sudoku book, and I'm like, I'm going to work a Sudoku puzzle till I'm done. And by the time I was done with the Sudoku puzzle on pen and paper, not my phone, not some other like diversionary thing, it's like just sit there in the pain and let it move on. Because I had this same thing just the other day, man. I was like, our minds are such a problem. I was driving home. I've been having a good week. The scale showed me a number that I'm recovering a little bit from my December. Nothing too crazy, but a few pounds. I went up 4 pounds during December. Really pissed me off. And anyway, I'm going back and I'm like, man, I was cruising by one of my favorite ice cream. I was going to the post office, which I don't go very often, and it's right by an ice cream place that I love to go to. And I was just trying to rationalize, and I couldn't get over it. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to go to the post office first, and then I'll figure this out. So I put my mind away, and I had to do all the shit at the post office. And I came out, and I really want, and I taught myself off the ledge and just drove right on by it. And it's just like you when I try to help people, I try to explain to them either you base, like, okay, so without me saying anything, how do you overcome that moment where you just want to say, like in that moment, I wanted to say, F it, I'm just done. Like, I don't care anymore. One thing of ice cream is not going to kill me. Because I've been, and the other thing is I've been fasting that day. It's like, oh, I'm going to have this meal later. And it's like, sometimes I think, that it's like once I have, like if I'm fasting, I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but if I'm like, oh, if I break my fast with that one bite of food, well, I kind of screwed up today anyway, I'm not fasting, so I might as well go ahead and eat whatever, you know what I'm saying? All of those are all rolled up into one, in my opinion. Man, I took us down a tangent, but anyway, do you have any thoughts around all of that?
Good. Yeah, one of the first things you say I wanted to follow up with a little bit is you made an excellent point with technology and kind of feeding into an addictive habits that some people have. A lot of people say that technology changes people, and I really think it just exposes who we are. I think a lot of the same parents that would be at the park with their kids and they're sitting on the phone and and they're pretending that they're watching their kids. I think, 30 years ago, those would have been moms and dads would be sitting and reading a magazine instead of being on a phone. So I don't think people generally don't change. At least on like the macro scale. With respect to dealing with some of those things, personal preference can go a long way within what works with someone's personality. So for me, my general approach, what works well for me is I basically say, I assume in general, there's one time a month where I'm going to get together with friends, family, maybe twice a month. I don't have a lot of friends. Or there's a holiday, or there's, like today I was at a business networking event. And when these social events come up, I go to those events, and I'm not a carnivore when I go to those events. I've tried to do bodybuilding, dieting through the holidays, and family is supportive, but they don't understand. And at least with food, for me, it's easier in those moments on Christmas to just eat like a human being on Christmas, and then when it's not Christmas, then I get right back on it. So for me, if I can know that I can have these moments in my life 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a month, then I just enjoy those events. And then when it's just me and my daughter, then I'm back in carnivore mode, or I'm back in fasting mode if I want to do a fast. For other people, it's going to be based on habits that they enjoy. So I had a client in the past that very analytical, very mathematical. So what worked really well for him was I just gave him a calorie number. And I don't like the calorie counting approach, but it fit his personality very well. And he used it very successfully to lose 50 pounds in 6 months.
Wow.
But for most people, that's not a great approach. A lot of people are going to drive yourself crazy. Fasting is kind of a double-edged sword at the same time. Fasting is extremely healthy. It's one of the healthiest things you can do. It's fantastic for fat loss, for getting into ketosis, for kind of clearing your head, for improving concentration. But at the same time, when you know how good it is, it's very easy to kind of have that New Year's syndrome, or that starting Monday syndrome, where once you know how good it is, if you have a bad meal, it becomes very easy to rationalize bad behavior under the guise of, don't worry, I can just do this post hoc and try and fix it in hindsight. But we can see how well that works for most people. So the real, I think, appropriate course of action there is to kind of come up with a plan based on your preferences of what you think could work for you or what you've tried in the past that's worked fairly well for you. And then to try and adhere to that as strictly as you can without driving yourself crazy. You know, you can always raise your standards.
Sure.
And it's perfectly okay to realize that you're going to have 1 or 2 steps back occasionally. No one's perfect. No one's on 100% of the time. You're going to make mistakes. And then what is your contingency plan to get back on track once that's over, and recognize that's going to happen? And then in spite of that, take the corrective action. So for me, it's about having a structured plan. But I get that that's not great for everybody.
Yeah. I think that's a very sound advice. I think one of the metrics that I used to track in my sobriety, I did not use AA, and I kind of did my own thing. It was just that's a whole nother. We don't have time to go through that whole ball of wax. But the point is that I was stubborn, and a lot of times when I was doing well, I was like, hey, I can have this beer, or drink a glass of wine or whatever. But when I really got serious, like when I was getting where I was learning, basically I was getting better I practiced sobriety for about 1.5 years until I was like, hey, I like it better over here than I do over here. I know that, and all. But I started tracking how long from the time I broke sobriety to when I started again. And I was trying to shorten that window. So instead of me drinking a beer on Friday night and just drinking all weekend, or drinking all that next week and going, okay, I've got 8 days before I reset myself. It was like, how far can I reset myself now? And I think for us that are overweight, I think that the advice of and I'm not trying to be challenging, but I think that if you are in a weight loss mindset and you're trying to, I've still got another 80 pounds in my mind to get off me. I can't allow myself to have a meal out of bounds because I can't shorten that window yet. I still, it triggers me too much. And I struggle with it. So it's I do think that, at least I hope, I should say, that when I'm 180 pounds, that if I wanted to have a nice meal with my family at Christmas or whatever, that I'll be able to do that and kind of control myself, and maybe I'll have healed some. But I liken it, the analogy I use is you have a daughter, right? When she was 2-3 years old, it's you do not cross the street unless you're holding my hand. You have to make a rule, and is that rule always going to be in place? No, she's going to grow up and learn how to look, and she's going to wind up being a young woman, and she'll cross the street without you. But when she's 2 years old, you have to tell her, you will never cross the street unless you're holding my hand, right? And otherwise she won't get it done. It's she's not of the mind. And I think that for obese people who sometimes have broken metabolisms and also have mindset issues, is that you have to be that firm with yourself to at least get the process going until you grow up into adolescence, if you will, or become an adult or whatever. Anyway, that's a long thing.
I largely agree. Moderation was something I was never great with, but my ex-wife was really good at only having one really small piece of something that she knew she shouldn't have. And to me, if I have one Oreo, I want to have the whole sleeve of Oreos. So for me at least, I'm a lot of the same way. I do better, being really, really strict 99% of the time, and then when I have those indulgences, I just try to keep it more reasonable and not go too crazy.
Absolutely. I think psychology has proven's a strong word, but psychology has there's moderators and there's abstainers. And I think on the obese category, or people that overuse alcohol or other substances, are there some in that population, probably like your guy who is hey, count your calories, you'll be fine, that are more moderators? They're just kind of bundled into that group. Most likely, yes, but the vast majority probably, and I have no scientific data for my vast majority comment, but the problem, probably the reason why they're over there is because they're not very good moderators, right? They've tried moderation over and over and over. Oh, I'm only going to eat, it's anyway. Let's go ahead.
I was going to say, with respect to food and addiction, there's also a huge emotional underpinning, not for everyone, but for a lot of people that I talk to, and you really need to know your why. Like, why are you doing this? And there has to be a really compelling reason. Because if you're just constantly going through this process because you feel like you should, and you think about how much it sucks and how much you're not enjoying it, we see how few people ever have lasting results with losing body fat or improving their health. We know that 95 to 99% of people that try to lose weight will lose some initially, and then they gain it back, and usually plus some. The whole diet mindset is, I think, is grossly not necessarily misunderstood, but miscommunicated in the media. As a father of a daughter, there's no shortage of people telling, especially young women, what to think, how to look, what size they need to be, how to dress, how to behave themselves, when really we should be empowering people to make better decisions. And these better decisions cumulatively over time will lead to better results. So I have a real love-hate relationship with a lot of the fitness industry, despite owning a studio and being part of it myself.
I have a note here. You just led me in because I got this from you. Did a presentation. I don't remember which one it was, but it was about weight loss and being carnivore and how it's not a weight loss diet. But one of the things that I don't know if you remember that YouTube video you made. It was very good. I'm going to link to that too below. But one of the things I was thinking about that when I was watching that video that you made was that the reason why it's successful, and I think it ties into this, is that most diets are, I'm going to not eat the cookie. I'm not going to eat this. Carnivore, just by the nature of it, says you're going to eat these foods and only these foods. And there is a deprivation. Well, I don't eat these, but the focus is so much on what I do get to eat. And so you're essentially breaking addictions by avoiding the bad stuff, but you don't really view it as avoiding because there's such a focus on the elimination of all of this and eat this. And generally the carnivore people that give you a prescription of what to do, they're like, eat as much as you want, eat whatever you want, just eat these. And I think there's a mind trick there that I think a lot of the benefits that people get from carnivore, and I know I have when I've experimented with it, I actually feel my best on it, but that's a whole other thing. Is that it's breaking the food addiction, but with it more ease because your mind's not tricked into this. Oh, I can't have this because you're like, no, I get all this. You know what I'm saying? Like there's not a message of deprivation, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I think the first at least couple of weeks if somebody does carnivore, probably at least the first month, there's kind of a focus on healing or just changing habits. It's also somewhat ironic because most people advocating that particular approach to carnivory are in fantastic shape to begin with. But there's also a decent amount of people that have been doing the carnivore diet for a while that aren't in the shape that they would like to be in. So obviously there's some nuance and that approach probably needs to be massaged a little bit as well. And that's where you can start manipulating things like your fat to protein ratio, whether you want to start implementing fasting, those sorts of things. Those are all dials that you can turn. But yeah, at least getting started in carnivore, I think the real purpose is to try and overcome food cravings and any kind of addictive patterns that you may have with respect to eating. I'm still to this day kind of an emotional eater. So for me, generally one meal a day works really well, and I know I can have that one meal, but at the same time, again, that's not going to work for some people. Thank you for the kind words about that video. That must be at least a couple of years old, so I don't remember a single thing that I said in that video, but I'm sure it's all good information.
Yeah, you were like, it's not really a weight loss diet, but it actually gets a result with weight loss. And mainly, I think it goes back to carnivore. I think Amber O'Hearn makes a very good point on this, on her literature and work, is that you can do carnivore that's really not ketogenic because you're probably over consuming protein, or you can do a carnivore formulated to be more ketogenic. Yep. And I think if you're in a weight loss, you really need, if you're hearing that word and you need to understand all that, dig around on those couple of things, but you need to make sure that your fat, not that I'm a dietitian or should give advice, but I think in that presentation you talk about getting your protein for, like, your first thing you need to decide is how much protein I'm going to take in, right? And then how much fat I need. And you need to make sure that then once you have that protein number, you adjust on a percentage basis to make sure that you can stay in, if you're trying to do weight loss, so that you stay in a ketogenic mindset. Someone like Ted Naiman would say, get your protein right and keep fat as low as possible, like the modified protein sparing fast. I've tried stuff like that, and it's like I don't really know if I'm losing weight or not, because I can't adhere without some fat in my diet. I can't comply. I struggle with that.
For me personally, at least recently, I feel best when my fat is like stupid high and I have low to moderate protein. So at least at the moment, I'm much closer to like a Paleolithic ketogenic diet, which is generally at least 80% fat. And it's funny, like I know I have more muscle than most individuals, and there are videos on my channel of me posing in my basement after working out. Most days I have 100 grams of protein a day. You don't need 500 grams of protein a day. Weight loss and changing body composition, to me, more than anything else, is going to come down to controlling cravings and appetite. And if you can adjust those ratios again to find that balance of protein and fat that works best for your physiology, and you're seldom hungry and you're not really craving things that you shouldn't have, that's going to make a huge difference. So for me, I completely agree. Protein sparing modifying fast for me doesn't work very well. I could have, and if I eat conventional carnivore diet where about 1 gram of protein to 1 gram of fat, I could eat 4 or 5 pounds of meat in a day and still be a little bit hungry. But if I have, a pound or a pound and a half of meat and I just crank that fat way up, that's really satiating for me. And again, those are things that you'll have to fine tune and you'll have to make the adjustments. But I think that needs to be the real focus of anybody that wants to improve their body composition is how can I control hunger and how can I control cravings?
I think that those are the two right there. And I for me, my what I do that might be helpful to someone is I found a rancher. I'm in Texas, so it's pretty easy to find ranchers. And I'm able to get good suet, grass-fed suet. $4 a pound, pretty damn cheap. She sells it to me in 5-pound blocks, and I break it down myself. But what I found, what was interesting about that, because I was like, I need more fat. One, and I'm ApoE. I'm getting in the weeds here, but I have a genetic predisposition with ApoE4 positive, meaning that I don't process saturated fat as well, and I should keep it down and all the rest. But 25 grams of suet, and I'm talking about quality white. It is white candle wax, essentially, is what it feels like, right? I don't know if you ever had real suet like that, right? But that little bit of fat, that's just that good of fat, will satiate my hunger. Like in other words, if I have a New York strip that's a full pound, and I add 25 grams, so you do 25 grams times, what is that? That's not even 100 calories, right? Or
120 calories.
220 calories of fat.
Yeah.
That fat, or let's say under 300 calories of fat. That fat will satiate me where I only eat half that steak. Like I can't even eat the whole damn steak because that fat has just arrested my hunger, and I'm like, wow, I feel great. And so essentially, what I'm doing is I take a little bit of, I chop it up, and I take a little dime-sized piece with a bite of my steak, and it's good. I mean, and basically, when I finish searing my steak, I know I'm getting in the weeds here. I thin slice the suet and I put it on top and let the suet kind of melt into it. I don't really cook the suet, and so adding the fat, I guess, is my point of good fat. I think people do that with butter and such, but I don't feel as good on butter. Like the suet is like I don't even notice it. Like I don't notice that I'm bloating. Where dairy with butter or bacon fat, it still makes me feel a little like I don't feel like I do on carbs, but I don't feel super clean. Like if I eat a steak with that suet, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. It feels good. I don't know. I'm just riffing on that a little bit.
I live in a small county, so I can go to my local Piggly Wiggly and get suet for, and they must just, and other people must buy it because I get it for $1 a pound. So I always have,
wow,
yeah, I always have cheap. More in my freezer than I know what to deal with. And there are times, and like I own my own business, so when I look at every business, like this is a fresh month. So like some months I'm definitely in the red, some months I'm very profitable. So like those months that are a little bit leaner, I'm thinking like, how can I eat carnivore without breaking the bank? Yeah, and if you can,
suet
suet's a
would
big
help.
Generally, at least for me, feeling good on higher fat compared to higher protein feels really good. And I also live 5 minutes from an elk farm, so I could get elk meat if I ever wanted. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you know a rancher, if you know a farmer, especially with the price of,
that's the way to go.
Eggs for breakfast, I'm thinking, man, this guy's rich.
They're here in Texas. Eggs are at least the eggs I buy are $6 a dozen. I don't know if that's expensive, but I buy. There's Vital Farms, so they're not soy fed. They're they're kind of like farm eggs, basically.
The cheapest eggs I can find are just under $5 a dozen, and those are like the sweatshop eggs. And the best ones at the grocery stores normally have are almost $10 a dozen right now. Which is
wow, man, we don't have that kind of price jump here. That's interesting. So basically, for me, going back to the living on the cheap, can of sardines in the morning. I like to eat at 9 and 5, 9 and 6. My wife doesn't really like me eating that early, but this is
sure.
what you do. So nine is sardines, and I break the carnivore rule by putting. Sometimes I have an avocado. I'm in Texas. Avocados are very easy to come by, and I noticed that the mineral content, or not so much the fiber, but whatever's in it helps me with my muscle. I don't get muscle cramps as much if I eat avocado. I'm not sure what's in there, maybe potassium or something that helps me. And I don't feel the same like bell pepper, like you said, squash, broccoli. I can tolerate, and I still might be ketogenic, but now that I've gone carnivore some, when I go back into quote unquote just basic, not even dirty keto, just plain old, here's a piece of salmon with some broccoli. I'm just like, oh my God, my gut can't handle all that broccoli. I'm like, I don't want to eat this stuff. Anyway, so sardines and then a New York strip at night.
When I first started doing carnivore, I was eating one meal a day, and I would grill 3 pounds of beef patties, and then I would stack up this huge plate, and I would sit down with my family, and my wife used to like look at me like I was going to have a heart attack, and I would eat 3 pounds of beef patties. So to try and make her a little less concerned, I started splitting it up through the day. So I'd have 6 eggs in the morning for breakfast, a pound of beef for lunch, and a pound of beef for dinner, and both of those worked really well. So, yeah.
I love it. Going back to the eggs, the last thing, if you get suet, one way to incorporate suet besides what the steak is, you could just, instead of, to grease the pan, just take 10 grams of suet, throw it in the pan, soften it, don't overcook it, and then scramble your eggs in the suet. You won't even notice there's suet in there.
And maybe I'm in a bit of a minority, but I like the taste of suet. And you've probably noticed too, different fats have different flavor profiles. So I would go, especially if I was making scrambled eggs, I would go extra heavy on the suet, and I'd brown it a little bit before I put my eggs in the pan. Mm-hmm. And it's
make it a little crispy.
Got like a bit of a nutty taste to it too, almost like there's nutmeg in it, or cloves, or allspice in it, but. Yeah, you've probably noticed that. Different cuts of muscle meat, different types of fat have different flavor profiles.
Yep. I've gone to where everyone talks about ribeyes or other things. New York strip just seems to be my favorite. Or a tri-tip. I eat tri-tip, which is more of a sirloin cut. And we've covered a lot. So let's talk a little bit about. I do. I want to kind of throw out there for people, we're talking pretty weight loss heavy, but I got sober in 2018, and do you have any thoughts, just throwing it out there, one of the things that I find in the keto community that people don't want to talk about is alcohol use, and it sounds judgy on my part, but people will get hardcore in comments on people's channels or whatever about them eating some asparagus or an avocado or something like I do, and say, well, you're not really carnivore, but yet they won't even think twice about having some bourbon or whatever, or margarita or whatever. And I'm not one to say that they shouldn't have alcohol per se, but I'm just saying that I'm much more of like going back to, especially if you are of the healing of the mind, like there's so many emotional issues tied to food. And I think for a lot of people that alcohol is a numbing, basically, you know, like when I wanted that ice cream the other day, it's like basically I wanted to kind of numb out. I wanted to kind of like, oh yeah, you know, it's you know, anyway. I'm just going to open up the frame for that, and without being judgy or anything like that. How do you view alcohol as far as part of a well formulated health
you're
plan?
absolutely right. There's a bit of a double standard. I mean, I'm going to have to take your carnivore card, by the way, because you are adding avocado occasionally.
Yeah. It's only maybe 2 avocados a week.
But truthfully, I lean in the can. Like I like a glass of wine now and then on those social occasions, but I don't think there's place for alcohol in a carnivore diet. And if you're going carnivore, you're probably going carnivore because you have some kind of condition that you're trying to ameliorate. Most people that get into carnivory have some autoimmune condition or some kind of digestive issue that kind of puts them in this camp. And maybe I was lucky that I just tried it on a whim. But if you're really looking to do some healing, you know, do you really want to put something in your body that we know is a class 1 carcinogen? This is one of the worst things you could do. And on top of that, at least to me, there's a really scary thought to me about not being in control of my thoughts or my actions. And when I was younger, I was playing poker and I had way too much to drink. And I had a friend under each arm, and they walked me down the stairs and they put me in a car and they let me drive home. And after that point, I said, I'm never getting drunk again. And you know, I haven't been the best with that over 15 years or whatever. But ever since then,
sure.
I've cut way back, and I will seldom get to the point where I get any more than like the slightest bit tipsy. Alcohol also, unfortunately, tends to expose a lot of demons that some people have. You know, sometimes food or, being on your phone or engaging in video games or some other behavior is a way to kind of shift what you're focusing on. And maybe, and those can be decent habits sometimes. Like sometimes we mentally and emotionally need a break. But alcohol or some types of drugs really have a certain way of exposing a lot of issues that people are going through. Some people get really, really sad when they drink, really, really depressive almost. Some people become violent, and those are considerations that need to be weighed out too. I would much rather somebody go out and have ice cream than go get drunk on carnivore, because of the potential ramifications of that course of action. So
sure.
I'm kind of with you too. I'm not saying that nobody should ever have a drink. I think it just needs to be put into the proper context of what's your goal in that moment. Are you just trying to enjoy a nice kind of casual evening with friends and family? Do some socializing? Sure. Have a drink or have a soda or have, a piece of pie in that moment and enjoy it and just be responsible with it. But alcohol tends to get way too much of a free pass within the carnivore sphere. You see too many people talking about how they like vodka or bourbon or whatever their drink of choice is. And I think the carnivore movement should really first and foremost be about health. We ought to be trying to lift each other up through this movement of how can we help each other through this journey to live our best lives. So I like a glass of wine now and then.
Well said.
But I don't have any wine in my house right now. I certainly don't keep hard alcohol in my house. And I think, again, at least for me, that's a much better approach, and that's generally what I advocate more of.
Absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, now that I'm 4.5 years sober, like I don't live in a day-to-day concern of like, it's like I've never been a smoker. You could have cigarettes all around. They don't really hold any power over me, is how I kind of view it. And I'm not really like, I never concerned that, I'm one I'm one pint of Ben and Jerry's away from going on a bender, but and it's like I'm trying to get myself, like, the alcohol I've let go of, and it's like, could I have a glass of wine? Like we just had a lovely meal at a friend of ours' house who's a very, very big into wine collecting, and they opened some very expensive bottles of wine, and one of the people there didn't know that I didn't drink, and they poured me a little, and I didn't have any because I didn't really want any. But my point is, I thought, could I? I probably could have, and not really had. I wouldn't have gone on a bender. I probably would have been. I could have been fine because I have now. If I'd have gone 2 days, 3 days, I'd have to be put myself in check. But then what my thought process is like, I have so much freedom. Like, I never think about alcohol anymore. I mean, I talk about it because I'm trying to help other people, but in my own life, it never runs across my brain like, oh, I should do this, or I apply willpower, I shouldn't do this. And it's like I'm trying to, going back to the moderating versus abstaining, I'm trying to abstain from sweets in particular so that I can get the same level of freedom from that. So I just like, that cake and ice cream has no power over me. And I don't know. I have a sense that I think that that's how it would be, but I'm not so sure if that. I don't know if I'm lying to myself around that or not.
I think with respect to at least sweets, and this is my own N=1 anecdotal experience, the more strict I can stay carnivore, the better. Like, as much as I love like a diet soda or an energy drink now and then, we're hardwired to where that sweetness just triggers something physiologically that makes us want more. Whether you think God made us or we're a product of evolution, we get that hit of sweetness and we want to put food away. It's a survival mechanism that's been hardwired into us. So even for me, black coffee, if I can stay away from black coffee, I find that my cravings for sweets goes way down. And the more I can just have water and red meat, salt, generally it becomes much easier. But if I have a diet soda, I'm usually hungry and like really wanting a meal a little bit later. Yeah,
it triggers.
Kind of, for me, makes me want food. So I would recommend, maybe trying that.
Well, we're bumping up against close to I think a time stop for you. I want to give you one more thing though. Electrolyte water, right? I've got. We're both have some. We've watched the Snake guy, right? That. You did. I want to throw out your video that you recently did though on the breakdown of electrolytes, and that's such a huge thing in the carnivore. One, if you're thinking about going carnivore, you need to address electrolytes. That's number one. You have to, because you will wind up good with I woke up with a muscle cramp the first time. I did 30 days of carnivore. I'm feeling great. I woke up in the middle of the night with a Charlie horse in my thigh. Like I was screaming so loud, my wife thought she was about to call 9. I was like, "Don't call 9." I was like, and thank God I had known the Snake diet guy, whatever, and so I had potassium, and I was like, "Go do this." I told her, and she made me a small glass of quote unquote snake juice, which is basically salt water and potassium, and I drank that sucker down. She overmade it. It was a little saltier than I was expecting, but let me tell you, in about 30 seconds, I was fine. I mean, literally, I was so surprised how fast. So I want to say thank you for making that video, because cost ratio, one, if you want to learn how to do it properly, he has a great video, which I'll link to, on how to break down and get your electrolytes. And I'm going to just shut up and let you talk about the electrolytes for a minute.
So electrolytes are being heavily plugged in ketogenic and carnivore communities. And I made a video kind of cautioning people to watch how much they consume, because if you're pounding electrolytes constantly, you're going to condition your body to also eliminate them at higher rates. And then if you don't continue with that intake, you can very quickly dehydrate yourself. And this is something I talk about, how bodybuilders will go way heavy on sodium for months on end just to get that paper thin skin leading up to a competition. But in general, both of us being, I guess, loose, I don't want to say fans of the Snake diet, but he's interesting.
Fan would be a bit strong for. Yeah, he's interesting.
He mixes snake juice really, really, really thick. I mix water and electrolytes at a level that is a little bit less concentrated than Gatorade. And the idea is I have really small amounts of electrolytes that I'm constantly consuming, so that if I miss a bottle of water, or if I have a busy day like today where I'm running around for 4 or 5 hours and I just don't get anything to drink, I'm not going to immediately have a massive headache or a migraine because I'm dehydrated. If
Absolutely.
you're not
Absolutely.
regularly adding salt or potassium or magnesium to things that you're consuming, you don't need a lot. You don't need a lot. So just be careful. Don't overdo it. And don't think that you have to buy these crazy expensive packets of electrolytes and constantly drink them back. In general, if you're eating and you're salting your food to taste and you're eating multiple meals a day, you probably don't need electrolytes at all. But it's a good idea to always have some on hand.
Absolutely, and I love your addition, because I do the same thing of adding a little bit of baking soda, and I have in my 1 liter I use like an eighth of a teaspoon versus I dumb mine down pretty much too, and that, you got to kind of find where you're at, but that a little bit of baking soda in replace of all that salt, it softens the water a little bit and it makes it more palatable. Also, on a tip on the magnesium, Judy Nutrition, she's a carnivore lady. She talks about having a magnesium spray, basically Epsom salt and water. You dissolve it and you can spray it on where your muscles cramps are, because magnesium will absorb through the skin. I thought that was interesting. Do you have thoughts around the magnesium supplementation as a spray versus through the digestive tract?
I assume either way is probably equally efficacious, and it's why Epsom salt baths are a thing. You can feel how much softer your skin is. The skin is somewhat porous. Testosterone used to be prescribed in a gel that guys would rub on their skin, and then they found out people were hugging their kids, and their kids were going into puberty early. True story. It's really horrifying. I don't add magnesium to anything that I eat. I guess I just haven't seen the need to, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I would only caution people, if you're going to add electrolytes, whatever they are, be very precise with your measuring, and make sure if you want to use teaspoons and not tablespoons. It's very easy to conflate the two, and you could end up
Very
mixing salt water that basically tastes like chicken stock. So
well, I'm going to give you the last word. We're on an hour, and I'm just trying to be respectful of your time. I'd like to, before I give you the last word, we in a couple of months, now that I consider you my friend, will you jump on another call with me and kind of give me I don't know, maybe a little bit more time. We can do some other topics. I was going to say maybe a little bit of accountability to see, because I'm trying to really hustle through about 20 or 30 pounds in the next couple of months.
And this has been a real pleasure, and I'd be happy to do this again, whether we record it or whether we're just casually talking, and that extends to any of your viewers as well. I'm always happy to meet people and kind of hear their stories and help in any way that I'm able to help in the way that I can. And I just, more than anything else, again, I just want to thank you for your time. I am not so naive to think that my twilight years are guaranteed to me, so I tend to be pretty scrupulous with the things that I do and the things that I put in front of my eyes and the people that I have in my social circle. So to have someone that took the time out of his day to shoot me an email and say, hey, would you love to chat? I mean, I'm not going to say no to that. And this has been really rewarding. I really appreciate this talk, so thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.